you. Thank you, Jessamine. Hi, I feel like I should be wearing a cape. But first, I'm just going to bless myself because I'm a superstitious scientist. So it used to be quite a daunting task for me to speak publicly about what I do. But I guess after the last 2 years, you're probably fed up of hearing about the immune system. But actually, about 5 years ago, I was at a party and I met this Aussie guy. And I was telling him in my Cork accent what I do. And I said, I'm an immunologist. And he turned around to me and said, that's so cool. You study emus. And I was like, But maybe after the last 2 years, a 10-minute talk about the second largest bird might be more interesting and possibly more humorous than what I have to say. But let's see about that. So it has been a frightening 2 years, but for us in the discipline, it's been great to see so many people connect with what is really a complex subject. And it's really challenged a lot of the dogmas that we hold sacred about what being immune actually means. It's been a great time for teaching immunology. As almost every week, there's some new developments that has just challenged what you were just teaching in class the previous week. Last year, I actually had the honor of contributing to the newest edition of our gold standard immunology textbook that's actually getting released next month. And already, it's probably out of date after the events of last Christmas. But it's actually called Janeway's Immunobiology, after the grandfather of immunology, an American scientist called Charlie Janeway, and sadly not after the great Starfleet Captain Catherine Janeway. But it does, Trekkie. Gets worse. Hold on. So that does lend itself to the terrible dad joke, which of course I'm going to share with me tonight, which is you ask someone, how did they learn about immunology? And they say, I learned the Jane way. Sorry. I'm so sorry. But anyway, casting my mind back to, I suppose, the start of the COVID-19 outbreak, as a relatively young, back then, investigator in the field, what really struck me was what we don't know about immunology in general. And at the time, what we didn't know about COVID-19 specifically. And it was actually quite frightening to turn on the TV back in March 2020 and see all these COVID-19 experts giving their predictions on how things were going to pan out. And I would be just dumbstruck, and almost looking at the TV going, what the fuck? What do they know that I don't know? And what's going on? This is a novel pandemic. But I think that some of the best communicators were those that could frame that quite well and actually point out what we know and what we don't know, and communicate to us that we needed to prepare for all eventualities. And unpopular opinion, possibly, but it's actually why I think the government here and their advisors did a pretty good job for the most part guiding us through this. This was unknown territory for everyone, and we had to wait and see. I hate using that phrase, but we had to watch the data pan out. And I think when you're dealing with something as potentially catastrophic as COVID-19 was and turned out to be, and still has the potential to be, it is better to err on the side of caution until you know more. So it's not all doom and gloom. Things did get better, and the riders of Rohan marched in to save the day. Lord of the Rings reference, sorry. So for me, I felt definitely on safer ground when it came to the rollout of the vaccine, and finally thought this was something I could contribute to. And we were really so lucky that so many things aligned and so much worked out. And really that was based on years and years of hard work. And one of the most important pieces of work was really comes from the original SARS outbreak back in 2003. So possibly there's some of you down there that might remember that. But that actually found that the spike protein, so there was possibly maybe some Buffy fans working on it back then, spike. But they identified the spike protein as the key target to vaccinate against in COVID-19, the so-called antigen. So no disrespect to Auntie Mary or Aunt Viv, sorry. But that's what triggers your body to produce antibodies against it. And that can actually be different for every infection, so it can be quite hard to identify. So we were really lucky there. And of course, the other big breakthrough was the RNA vaccines. And again, this was something I felt a little bit more qualified to speak about, as the subject of my PhD was a family of molecules called microRNAs. And I've been following the RNA therapeutics field for quite some time. So in my Bio 101 lectures, I introduce RNA as the kind of crazy, unstable cousin of DNA. And DNA is, of course, what we inherit from our parents. It's really stable. It's the ingredients for our kind of the book of life. And RNA then is a temporary copy of that and actually does all the hard work in our cells and makes the proteins that give rise to life. And so you can kind of think of it as the shooting script in the movie adaptation of life. And let's hope that turns out more like The Lord of the Rings than The Hobbit adaptations. So, but the real surprising thing about RNA vaccines is because RNA is a temporary copy, it's really highly unstable and really sensitive to being degraded, being turned over in our bodies. And this can actually make it a bitch to work with in the lab. And I used to always say that working with RNA is so degrading. Sorry. But lo and behold, it's been injected into millions of arms worldwide, has instructed the formation of the spike protein and a somewhat successful protective immune response. So after getting over the stability issues, the other issue with RNA vaccines, of course, the other important issue was safety. Would this new technology be safe? And again, there was lots of work that was previously done in the field that we could rely on here, especially in the cancer therapeutics field. And they had been using RNA vaccines there and had shown that they were pretty well tolerated in people and only resulted in the kind of desired on-target effects of pain at the injection site, swelling, which of course is a sign that your immune system is being triggered. And thankfully, no magnetism or 5G signals were reported. And of course, the mass immunization that resulted, there was some very rare side effects, but for the most part, this has been pretty well tolerated and has really changed vaccination, and I think is the scientific success story of the pandemic, at least for me. So what does this mean for immunology research and for my work going forward? Well, I actually work in a bacterial infection called TB. Has anyone heard of it? Yeah, oh good, okay. So like COVID-19, it's another respiratory infection. Sorry, I wasn't working with it today, I promise. But unlike, it actually has a few years on COVID-19. It's been plaguing mankind since the dawn of agriculture, really. And it was particularly a huge problem in Ireland and Europe in the last about 100 years ago after the Industrial Revolution. But we actually have a vaccine against TB, and it's called BCG, and it actually turned 100 years old last summer, so bravo. But probably time to retire, because unfortunately, because of the interaction between TB and our immune system being so complex, the BCG vaccine doesn't give that great protection in the long term. And I guess the jury's still out on whether COVID-19 vaccines will last as well. But we have these new technologies now, and it's really great. It's a really exciting time. So what's the problem? So I think we actually are living amid a scientific renaissance. Technologies, ideas aren't lacking at all. I think we're really lacking almost ambition and foresight. So I'm actually surprised so many of you heard of TB tonight, so that's great. Because many people think of it as something that affected our grandparents or isn't really in Ireland. And that's true. To an extent, but like COVID-19, again, TB is a fire and it's burning through the world, just not here. It's particularly prevalent in places like Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and people there are dying. So just like the campaigns, I suppose, to vaccinate the world against COVID-19, I think that we need to campaign to vaccinate against all vaccine-preventable diseases, COVID-19, TB, malaria, HIV, the list goes on. And that won't be easy, and there are genuine scientific challenges, but with support, with funding, typical, you're looking for funding. But with that, we'll overcome these. But we really need political and economic will, and we all need to push for that. We need to write to our TDs, sign the TRIPS waiver on the Amnesty International website to push for COVID-19 vaccine equity as a first step. And we need to do this not because the fires might spread here or because a new variant might spread here that would undo all our good work, but because these are fires and they are burning, and not to be morbid, but people are being burnt alive. I think that the access to these technologies shouldn't be an economic privilege. It really should be a human right. So sorry for depressing you all, and I'll just finish up by saying that thank you to everyone for doing your part, I suppose, during COVID-19 and for following the guidance when we didn't know what else to do, taking a shot in the dark by being vaccinated with RNA, and for engaging with science and trusting science and scientists. And yeah, we still have a lot to do. And I guess this means that I'll never have time to actually make major scientific breakthroughs on why emus can't fly. So I'll leave it there, and thank you so much.